Hello there, everybody. So I can see that we've got around about 53, 54 people joining us. So that's absolutely fantastic. Thanks very much for coming along in your lunchtime. I'm sure it's a very strange new world as it is for all of us. I just thought I'd start by introducing some of the panelists that we've got with us today. So first is myself. I'm the chair of the NI Cyber Cluster, and there's my son sneaking in behind us as well. So I'm the chair of the NI Cyber Security Cluster, and also director of Vertical Structure, which is a local organization. We do a lot of cybersecurity work around security and penetration testing and other bits and pieces. We're also with us today, we've got Joe Dolan, who's head of the NI Cybersecurity Centre, and we've got Sam Kinkaid, who's the Cyber Protect Officer from PSNI, and also with us we've got Sinead Lee, who is the Regulatory Affairs Manager from Ofcom. So as you will have just seen, obviously, we're all working in a very different world. Things seem to have changed significantly since last week. And we are now all in this world altogether. So what we thought we would do is, as a group of cybersecurity organizations, we thought we'd get together, get some of the real experts in the field. So as I say, people like Joe and Sam and Sinead, and bring them together and give some thoughts about how we can all secure ourselves while working remotely. I did hear an organization recently who don't like the use of the word remote because it makes it sound very remote to clients. So they're using the term working virtually, but we'll maybe stick to remote working from here. So just a little bit about Northern Ireland Cyber Security Cluster, NI Cyber. It exists to promote the expertise of greater than 35 companies from Northern Ireland, identifying opportunities for business and national, international collaboration, and also to promote career opportunities in cybersecurity. Those of you who work in cyber will be aware that there is what they call the skills gap at the moment, and there are, or at least there were, a significant amount of jobs in the cybersecurity world. Some of our client companies are up on the screen here. So we've got everybody from Amplify to ourselves at Vertical Structure. And also we're supported in this endeavor by the lovely people at Carson McDowell. So we really appreciate everything that they do to help us to do these sort of bits and pieces. Today, as I said, we've got myself, Joe Dolan, Sam Kinkaid, and Sinead Lee. So let's get into it. Where are we now? Well, we're all sitting behind our machines, probably in a home office, some of you sitting on the couch, some of you at the kitchen table trying to homeschool children all at the same time. I know that's what I've been spending my time doing. We've got pretty much 100% remote or virtual working. We've got trying to continue with business as usual. Business as usual, what does that even mean these days? But that's what we're trying to do. We've got offices which are now pretty much closed and shuttered. We've got devices maybe connecting now to our infrastructure and to our network that we haven't been aware of previously, that maybe haven't existed in the past. And we've got to start to be aware of all of these items. I come from a software development background originally. I started off doing this in around about 2000, 2001. And I've been working remotely on and off for pretty much all of that time. It's quite usual in the software development world. In the admin, finance, and other industries, it's not normal in any way, shape, or form. So that's what we're here to do, is to try to help to explain some areas for improvement that we can undertake. So one of the things that I always find very, very useful is the National Cybersecurity Centre. It's one of it is the foremost group of experts, probably globally, definitely nationally. The NCSC are a fantastic group of people who really work hard. Their mission is to secure the United Kingdom from cyber threats. They have issued some guidance on home working, which I've kind of brought into this presentation as well. I would strongly urge you to go and visit the site that's listed at the bottom. What I'd also urge you to do is to have a look through the guidance. We're going to make this presentation available as a PDF, but also as the whole webinar available. At the end, I've linked to all of these sites, so you don't need to worry about scribbling them down now in front of you. So first things first, we've now got users who are working remotely who might not be used to working remotely. Passwords, as I'm sure Sam will attest, are one of the key areas for compromise within systems. So what we're looking to do here is we're looking to set strong and long passwords for all of our users. We've worked in organizations before where we found that there are things like, there are issues like users keep forgetting their passwords. So therefore somebody keeps a file on their desktop called passwords.xlsx or something like that, which contains a list of everybody's passwords, and they're normally not very good. So what we've got to remember is that when we're working remotely, that actually authentication is one of the key things that we can do to help secure ourselves. Two-factor authentication should be in place wherever possible. Sometimes it can be a bit of a barrier for less technical users, but if it is possible to use it, then I would strongly suggest bringing it into play. We also need to consider our administrative users separately. So what are the keys to the castle? What are the things that we have that we really, really need to protect? If we think about in the software development world, we might have AWS access, we might have Office 365 access, or Azure AD access, or things like that. We've got to consider who the admin users are and help them to secure themselves more appropriately. But the first thing is, let's secure our users' passwords. So don't allow them to have, passwords like Titanic 2019 or 2020, like we have seen with some of our organizations that we've worked with in the past. I think one of the things we've also got to be aware of is that our teams are going to be a bit confused in some cases. They're not going to be used to working from home. They're not going to know where things are, what things are available. So make software easily accessible. Make it so that your users don't have to download or don't feel like they need to download that latest version of Office from some Russian wares site or those sort of places. This is making your software, making the software that they need to do their job, make it easily accessible in a licensed, usable manner. Office 365 and Google both offer, and G Suite both offer Office packages of those sorts of things. Also, we did a survey internally with some of our people and some of our teams, and one of the things that they all listed as a key requirement for working from home was writing how-to guides. So you write a how-to guide for everything. So how do I pay an invoice? How do I log on to Office? How do I connect through to the file server that I'm used to accessing? I know that in some organizations, they maybe have Office 365 running for their email, but maybe they still have a file server internally. So how do our users get access to that? Do we use remote desktop? What do we do? Write down how that is going to how that's going to happen. I'm going to cover it a little bit later as well, but we also need to think about what hardware should we use. So should we allow users to use their own hardware? Should we allow them to use their own laptops? If we do, then what do we? What can we? What should we expect of that hardware? And let's cover that again in a wee second. The other thing that we were thinking about is that sometimes we get these calls, and I get them mostly on my home phone now, but they're mostly from Microsoft tech support centers telling me that I've got an opportunity to get a free version of Windows, or that I've got a problem with my Windows install or something like that. Users who are tending not to work from home may not be used to those tech support calls. So what we should try to do is to encourage users to report them. So if they feel that something is that they've got a phone call from someone that they shouldn't have got, encourage them and tell them how to get in touch. Encourage them to understand how to report an incident, and tell them that it's not going to get them in trouble if they report it. It's always easier to understand to fix something if you know about it than in 10 days time when the whole thing's gone wrong. So let's think about bring your own device, think about how-to guides, and think about making your software easily accessible for your users. What else have we got? Well, we were thinking about cloud, we were thinking about the office, we were thinking about connectivity. So don't just open up access to your infrastructure. So we've been working with some clients over the last while, and one of the things that they've asked us to do is to open up access to their internal systems to any, essentially, to the remote IP addresses, and that's not an effective way to do things. So if you're working from a cloud infrastructure or from a you need to access your systems remotely, don't just ask your sysadmins to open up the access to any IP address. That's not going to lead to good things. So I would just try to make sure that you're securing your cloud infrastructure by not opening it up to the world. There are also tools in things like Office 365 and G Suite. Office 365 has some fantastic ability within the Azure AD environments and within the Office 365 compliance and security screens to be able to block out users, to be able to detect users who, for instance, have done impossible travel, things like that. So these are things you should be trying to sort out, and also secure your connectivity. So what about accessing sensitive resources? I've already spoken about the fact we shouldn't open up those to the world, but we should be having a VPN in place for accessing your sensitive resources. So let's not just open up everything to the world. If we need access to the office, we can do that through a VPN, and we can get that looked at. Happy to answer any questions on those sort of things in a minute. So then we come to the subject of devices, and in here I always think it's absolutely vital to consider the use of your policies versus what happens in real life. So do you support bring your own devices? Do you allow your users to use their own machines to connect into your infrastructure? I've seen examples of this over the last wee while where people have an old laptop that they're suddenly using to store some of their company sensitive data on. If you're going to use BYOD, then you've got to be prepared to manage it or to help manage it. You've got to consider whether encryption is in place. You've got to consider about the ability to remote wipe. You've got to remember that you potentially are going to lose access and control of your data. And of course, the worst thing of all would be to get infected by some form of ransomware or malware while you're on while this is all taking place. And that's much more likely when you bring in remote, bring your own devices. Personally, if you can, as an organization, I always try to issue laptops or issue devices to users. Sometimes that's not possible. You don't have enough money to issue those to all users. And if you don't have access to that, then some of the things you should be thinking about are listed on the screen there. So make sure you say to your users, please make sure your devices are encrypted. Have a how-to for that. Please make sure that you have an anti-malware software installed, and tell your users what they should be doing from there. I mean, the next ones are free Wi-Fi usage. That's less likely to be happening now, as many users are probably not working from coffee shops. Well, we hope they're not anyway. But free Wi-Fi usage or shared Wi-Fi usage, we should be a lot more cautious. So we shouldn't just allow users to connect in from any old free Wi-Fi. So just again, a how-to guide. How can I secure myself when I'm working remotely? What about things like USB devices, USB drives? Should we allow the use of USB drives? Again, we think about the data that's potentially we're losing control of. When we're in the office environment, we have access to the data. As soon as you're working remotely, then users may have the ability to plug in a USB drive and copy the data off. And we've just got to try to be aware of those sorts of things. What about backups and software updates? Backups are, we have a bit of a mantra in our office that a backup isn't a backup until it's tested. We actually have some stickers made up as well. So if you would like a sticker with that on, then please let me know. But we actually have, we find that one of the biggest issues that users encounter around backups is that they think they're doing them correctly and they haven't been tested. If you haven't in the last week or so tested one of your backups because of a disaster recovery test, I would strongly urge you to go away and do so now. And I think that that's a really important thing. Also to consider how your backups are taking place for the newly remote devices. And also consider your software updates. So your machines that the users are going to be using, if they bring your own device, have they updated the machines regularly? If they haven't, then you're opening yourself up to a lot of trouble potentially. So let's try and consider those sort of things. So are users using old versions of Windows 7, Windows 7 laptops? If they are, then maybe there's something you can do as an organization to help them. Can you provide them with a new machine? Can you provide them with an updated license or something like that? But it's really important to make sure that we're not opening ourselves up to issues. And also consider, as I said earlier, the difference between what is real life and what are your policies. Okay. And we also have to remember that the scamming doesn't stop. Okay, so the scamming doesn't stop just because we're here. I've got some examples here, and I'm pretty sure Sam will probably talk through a couple of these as well. But what I thought I'd just present are some examples of some of the scams that have been seen over the last little while. In here, you can see there is a coronavirus latest update.dat file. It's from the Ministry of Health news portal. It's a very simple one to see that it's fake, but not everybody will be aware of that. What about this one? Well, this comes directly from the World Health Organization, apparently. And all we need to do to protect ourselves is to click on the safety measures. Another one here where they give you a tax refund of £128.34 from the government gateway, which I think is really interesting because it's very, very specific about the COVID-19 issue. So these things are happening, and these things are very, very relevant, especially at the moment. So making sure your users are aware of the phishing issues that could be around. And finally, there was this one, and I actually think I stole this off Sam's LinkedIn page, so I hope he'll forgive me for that. This was the official message from the government, is the top one, and the bottom one is that you've been officially recorded as leaving your home on 3 separate occasions yesterday. Therefore, a fine of £35 has been added to your account. So this is a scam email, a scam text in the second time, and a legitimate one in the first one. So that's what we've got to be aware of. Okay, so we've all got to be aware of those sort of things. And how can we do that? Well, there is some training available, and I would strongly suggest everybody should go out and have a look at the NCSC training. One of the things you could do is you could ask all of your staff to undertake it. It takes half an hour to do. There's a quiz at the end, and you can ask for screenshots of the responses. I think it's a really useful thing to be doing, and it helps you protect. I mentioned it earlier, but practice your instant response before it happens. So when an issue, so that the staff know what to do should an incident happen. Do you know who to call? Do you know who to contact if something was to be an issue? And what about rewarding your team for training as well? So maybe get them a Deliveroo or an Uber food delivery or something like that to help encourage them to do the training. But making sure that they know what to look for and what the instant response should be if something were to happen. Again, I've just provided 2 different links, 2 different documents at the end here, one of which is from the NCSC, the National Cyber Security Centre again. This is for small businesses and some basic information about defending yourself from issues. And the second one is Europol advice, which I found very useful as well. They also mention at the bottom of this one, which I really like, which is the idea of keeping business and leisure apart. So don't you make personal use of teleworking devices. So, or if you do, then have some rules and procedures in place. So do you allow your users, for instance, to watch Netflix on their work devices? Should you allow them to let their kids do their homework on your work devices? Those sort of questions you need to be aware of. Okay, so those are some tips from us and from the NCSC and from Europol. I've put in a set of links at the end here, and yes, they're ugly, but we will provide all of these links separately as part of the slide presentation, but also sending out in an email, and I think Gillian's going to take care of that for us. So I'm very happy to answer any questions, but I think I'm going to pass what Gillian's asked in the chat there. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in place, either in the chat room or in the questions room. But what I'll do is I'll pass over to, I think it's Joe next is going to talk. So I'm going to turn off, but I will be hanging around, obviously. And if there's anything that I can answer in the meantime, then please let me know.
Thank you, Simon. Gillian, if you can give me a presentation, I'll stick my presentation up here then.
Yeah, that should be fine over to you now, Joe. If it doesn't, let me know and I can run your slides. Oh, there we go.
Hopefully everybody can see that. Listen, guys, I guess Simon said, thank you very much for taking the time, and hopefully the information you find coming from us today is useful to you. Simon's covered a lot of the good messages that ourselves in the Northern Ireland Cyber Security Centre would be sort of re-amplifying on behalf of the National Cyber Security Centre in the UK, and probably putting it into a more Northern Ireland context. So definitely a great ambassador for us in that regard. A wee bit about us. For those who don't know who we are, the Northern Ireland Cyber Security Centre has been set up as part of the national response around cybersecurity in terms of being able to make Northern Ireland and the UK a much safer, secure and resilient place for citizens and business. And I think the wealth of people attending this webinar and others shows that this is obviously of concern for a lot of businesses and a lot of people. We can't do this on our own. We are very small, and our team is only 4 people, but we are very much connected in with a lot of other what we call representative bodies right across Northern Ireland. So we are working with the Institute of Directors, the CBI, Chamber of Commerce, Federation of Small Business, NICFA in the third sector, and we will be reaching out to the Ulster Farmers Union, the Northern Ireland Retail Consortium and Retail NI, so that we can try and get the key sort of challenges and I suppose threats and that are happening across the business and our society as a whole, and hopefully then tailor our own messages to make sure that they resonate in the areas that are most prevalent. Four key rules, and I'm not going to bang on about who we are and what we are, because the important thing today is really to try and get questions in from yourselves and trying to get a feeling about what are the challenges out there on the ground, so that we can react to that and give you that sort of feedback today. But our four key rules. One is advocacy. Basically, what Simon has just done there is talking to people about what are the security issues and challenges and threats that are happening across the world and in our society today. We're definitely doing that through those bodies that we've talked to and webinars and events. There were a lot more events happening. Those don't seem to be the case anymore, which is why we're moving on to virtual channels such as this. Coordination right across various groups, and we'd welcome input from yourselves. If there are groups that you're not represented in terms of who we're currently talking to, let us know, and we'll try and hook up with other bodies that gets our voice and our messages out there. And then there's the whole collaboration piece, which is looking at the likes of the NCSC, our colleagues in Scotland and Wales, in terms of what is working, what's not working, and sort of looking at lessons learned across the UK. Some of the messages you'll hear today will reiterate what Simon's just told you, but I think this picture here does one of two things. One, it makes me wish I was where he is, nice and warm, or maybe not, depending where that might be in the world. But the other aspect is, who could it be? Is that you, or could it be someone else actually remotely accessing your systems now that we've all moved away from the office and a nice, safe, secure sort of everything on premise? So as Simon said, it's important that we know who is accessing our systems, and we have the proper controls in place to be able to authenticate and also authorize the users. So authentication is saying, I know who you are, and authorization says, and I'm giving you permission to access certain resources. So the person in sales isn't allowed necessarily to access the resources in finance and potentially then open themselves up to fraud. So Simon also talked about the device it's connecting. I think in this sort of reaction to try and get our business secured, we do run the risk of actually making it less secure, both in terms of what could happen to it later on, maybe not in the first few days, but what could happen later on. And it's important that we understand the types of devices that are connecting into our systems and what we would term the posture of those. So what is the operating system? Is there antivirus on that? And actually put in place a policy if there's not already one there. I'm not a great advocate of bring your own device, really around sort of the data ownership. What happens to the data that goes on to someone else's device? do you have a policy in place as to what happens should that device become compromised? How do you protect yourself? So there's a whole raft of other issues that do need to be considered if you are looking for people to use their own devices. It may be a simpler option to invest in a replacement device for them that is corporately owned, that you own, can manage, and have some kind of ownership over longer term. Plus, if data gets lost, whose responsibility is that then? Is that the individual or is it corporate? So a whole raft of things that need to be considered in there. Only grant access on a need-to-know basis. Now, there's different various ways you can do this, but especially in those global accounts around the likes of Azure and Office 365, minimize the number of people who have access to those, and definitely put some kind of additional password policy on those. So where you might have 12 characters for your normal policy, 3 random words, you might say, well, actually for those significant accounts, we want to put 2-factor authentication and a 25 character type of limit on those. So it's just to protect the crown jewels. Again, how is your data being transmitted? Is it being secured? Are you using HTTPS into your services? Is it encrypted in transmission? If you're using personal information, you definitely would recommend you consider using VPN services, or if you're using sensitive or IPR information, again, you want to protect that data in transit. So talk to your IT folk and see if you can establish VPN services back into your applications. You're probably working on your own home Wi-Fi. As Simon said, you're probably not using the cafe as they're all closed. But what's your own home security like? Is your Wi-Fi secured? Are you using good, strong authentication there? I'll talk later on about maximizing the use of the bandwidth you have. How do you know someone else isn't in the same problem and actually consuming some of your bandwidth from next door or whatever? So definitely would ensure having a look at your own home security and following some of the advice and guidance that we would have in and around the office. So I'd reiterate the whole idea of backing up data regularly, and this is probably more from an accidental damage perspective, being in the home rather than from a cyber attack. There is more risk that if you're sitting on the sofa as I am now, or at a desk, or there's lots of more people in the house at one time than you would expect, that these things drop off your lap, they get damaged, whatever. So if you have regular backups, and I would suggest that that is daily in the home, that then you have more chance of recovering from that, both from an accidental and a cybersecurity perspective. Mobile devices, for the same principle, a lot of mobile devices, tablets, whatever, again, protect those. Make sure that people can't access them, especially if you've got a work mobile or a work tablet or a device. Make sure that the password protected, that someone can't inadvertently come on and start using that laptop, especially if they all start to look the same, inadvertently, and maybe accidentally do something that they shouldn't. Be more vigilant. We just noticed a tweet from Proofpoint, who's a large organization who look at global threats and trends, and they've just come out today to say that the coronavirus is by far the single most themed all channel campaign that they've seen ever. Now, that's a statement. So there's a lot of people definitely jumping on the bandwagon here for misinformation and being able to fish across many channels. And I know Simon has touched on them, and I think Sam will touch on others. So reiterating a lot of the messages that Simon's already talked about there, but hopefully they do resonate with you and you take them on board. And a more practical thing, what we're hearing from especially people in the more rural communities, is where you're now working from home and there's a lot more people looking to access the broadband, to access services at the same time. If you're homeschooling or you've got kids in who want to just try and keep them occupied, the whole connectivity, the whole capacity issue becomes a problem. So certain things that maybe you want to think about how you maximize that connectivity. And it'd be interesting to hear how many people are having those sorts of issues. Try and use the right connectivity for the right thing. And what I mean by that is, in everybody's home, you probably have broadband over a telephone line. So I don't know if like me, you tend not to use a telephone line anymore. Or a lot of houses they probably don't have that. But what we suggest, if you make calls on the telephone line, that starts to free up bandwidth for other resources. Mobile phone, so it might be easier to make use of the 3G if you've access to 3G phone signal for conference calls, rather than again trying to do that on a broadband platform. And again, it's just trying to move services to a platform or a method of connectivity which starts to ease up maybe one single channel. If things are really bad, then it may be a case that you start to invoke what I would term maybe a difficult policy in the own home, which is look at whenever there are pressures on that connectivity. So you might want to say to your kids, look, we have meetings normally between 10 and 12. Don't be doing any streaming in the morning time, or vice versa in the afternoon. But look to try and put policies in around prioritizing certain functions within the home, if that's possible. Easier said than done, I'm sure. Wired versus wireless. Now, I'm not sure if people are actually finding that actually it's the Wi-Fi in the home that starts to get congested, and it's actually not the broadband connectivity out of the home. And this might be more in sort of cabled scenarios rather than sort of ordinary broadband scenarios. But again, it might be easier to try and do a wired connection to some devices. And again, that might be because Wi-Fi doesn't stretch to those locations within your home, rather than trying to run across Wi-Fi. So it may be that's the issue. And test your speed. You may not be getting the maximum broadband coverage that you possibly could now. So you may have got your broadband in a few years previous, and you've got better coverage now in your area. Talk to your broadband provider and see if that can be upgraded or not. It may be possible. So other things to consider, and this is, I think this graphic from Ofcom sort of highlights the sort of pressures that can be on a broadband link. You know, so if you have somebody streaming a high definition movie, well, that's 3 high definition video calls, or 30 or ordinary sort of audio conference calls, or somebody streaming. So you can see that when you aggregate this stuff up, it actually starts to make an impact on what you're actually being able to use. And a wee bit of consideration about what's being used and when it's being used throughout the home can actually make a big difference in how you can actually function as a business and as a home. So look, guys, that's a lot of the messages have already been said by Simon, and I know Sam will pick up on some of the key sort of trends that are happening throughout. We're here to offer advice and guidance out across Northern Ireland. That's our webpage there, niscybersecuritycentre.gov.uk, and definitely follow us on Twitter, because we re-amplify a lot of good guidance and trends that are happening out across Northern Ireland through that Twitter feed as well. So I hope you found that advice and guidance a bit more practical than security, useful in terms of being able to operate in this sort of unprecedented times. So thank you, guys. Happy to take any questions.
Hi, it's Gillian here. Simon, there are a couple of questions have come in. Simon, if you want to take a stab at answering those.
Yep, no problem at all. Thanks, Gillian. So, Joe, just so you know, your screen is still being shared there.
Yep.
So I saw a couple of questions which were, firstly, can I discuss the security of communication tools such as WhatsApp, Slack, Confluence, Jira, Facebook sites, etc. Coming from Bill. So Bill, firstly, thank you very much for sending that on. So with a lot of those, the things, especially things like Slack and Confluence and Jira, etc., they've always been remote anyway, because they've always been software as a service. So the key messages with those, as with all of the other things that we've mentioned, are protecting access to those environments. That includes making sure that you have decent password policies in place, making sure that your users have set a strong password, making sure that your users are securing themselves, and that you're forcing them almost to secure. 2FA is always a good thing, especially with things like Slack and Confluence and Jira. When we talk about things like WhatsApp and Facebook sites and that sort of thing, I'm a little more, we try to be a little bit more cautious. I personally try to keep all personal stuff in WhatsApp and work stuff in Slack or Teams, depending on who we're working with. We have multiple different things. So we would have maybe Slack or Teams, Microsoft Teams, or something like that for doing personnel communication. So I'd strongly suggest doing that. WhatsApp is an effective medium. It's important to remember that it is encrypted end to end, but in many cases the device itself is the one that is to be cautious about. So if your mobile phone, for instance, gets stolen and they're able to access the device, then they'll be able to read all of those messages. So that's something to be very aware of. It's also very clear sometimes that when you're, for instance, added to a WhatsApp group and a random number is added, how do you know that that person is actually who they say they are? So I would urge some caution before using things like WhatsApp to communicate on the to communicate in that sort of way. There are a great number of tools to do that, but again, it will depend on what your bring your own device policy type risk appetite is, I suppose. So I hope that helps. I hope that kind of answers your question, Bill. Slack, Confluence, and Jira have always been external, and they should have a good, decent level of protection anyway. It's important to keep on protecting them and keep on with the same ideas. We also have a question here from Sinead, and thanks very much, Sinead. Now, I am not a lawyer, so I'm not going to talk too much about the data protection legislation around this. But what I would say is that Sinead's question is, I'm not a cyber expert like you, but advise businesses re-compliance. I'm hugely concerned at the use of certain video software apps without due consideration for data protection. Again, I think that's really important to be considering. So with this GoToWebinar thing that we're on at the moment, for instance, our session is currently being recorded. That means that all the information that goes down here will be available externally. In many cases, it's possible to switch on recording onto screen sharing or those sort of bits and pieces. So we've got to be very, very cautious about how we're doing this. What about logs of chats? And if there are chats taking place outside of work environments, then we've got to be cautious of those. I would always urge you to be very aware of where you're pasting or displaying sensitive personal data, or displaying data in any way, shape, or form, and consider the fact that processing has now moved, especially in the last couple of weeks. So maybe our team at Castle McDowell would be a good person to talk further about that at some point over the next couple of weeks. Maybe a particular topic for covering.
Just Simon on that, I mean, I know internally we have policies around the use of conferencing facilities, and the likes of the sort of chats and what have you are not stored for those very specific reasons. But your company may have other companies may have other policies, but again, I think it is important that there is consent, that people are happy that whatever has been recorded has been consented to.
Brilliant.
Okay, I think
so I hope that answered the question. Sorry, Gillian.
Yeah, I think that's all the questions that there are in at the minute. Oh no, there are a few more. Simon, do you, there's another one here about analytics data sharing by app provider. I don't know if that's maybe just been covered off.
Sorry, I can't actually see that one at the moment. Maybe you could send it to me while Sam's talking, and then I'll maybe try and answer it at the end.
Okay, will do.
Brilliant,
okay,
thanks.
Sam, I have your slides up if you want to crack on.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Gillian. Again, with thanks, as Joe said, to the Cyber Cluster, Simon and Gillian, for arranging this and for allowing us to participate today. A lot of what I'll go over has been mentioned by Simon and Joe. I'm not going to go into any great detail, just merely to give a police slant to it. And Gillian's very kindly going to carry on with my slides here. If you want to go to the next one there, Gillian. So again, the threats that we're going to see really are not going to change by virtue of the fact that people are remote working. Ransomware, phishing, and network intrusion are the three main threats that we're seeing organisations across Northern Ireland facing. The likelihood is the threat will increase as staff are working from home because, as Joe's mentioned, the attackers are probably understandably labelling a lot of their phishing emails and their campaigns with COVID-19 or worse to that effect, knowing that there is a massive interest out there amongst individuals because of worries about their families, about their employment, and that they've realised that people are more likely to click on a link. So you'll see there again, no big change. The ransomware, phishing, network intrusion, they're on the NCSC's incident trends from last year. The example of the ransomware variant there you can see, which I find very hard to pronounce, is again one of those ones that's now out as a high threat against organisations. This group again, they favour stealing information, stealing data, so they'll blackmail you to decrypt, or they'll blackmail you to prevent it going out in public. And you go to the next one there, just Julian. So again, examples we've seen, Joe's mentioned off and Simon, phishing emails, again, concentrating around government branding, gov.uk, NHS, HMRC, the World Health Organization. There are a lot, and probably our concerns probably more weighted towards small organizations. There are a lot of small businesses out there who are waiting for their £10,000 grant, their £25,000 grant, or their employee retention scheme to kick off. So emails which mention things like rebates, grants, are going to entice people into clicking on them. Again, fines, we would expect that to come out because the media, we're all used to sitting at home now with 24/7 news. The media are publicising, what are the police going to do? I know some English police forces have VCPs up and running, and they're stopping cars. So there will be concern amongst people, or an expectation maybe that when they step out their door, they're going to get stopped. So the likes of that text message that Simon put up, again, really is more of an example of what a criminal can do. You've been spotted, your car's been spotted, things like that there. Anything that will allow somebody to click on a link or follow a hyperlink on their phone. Again, what are we looking at? Probably the theft of personal information or supplying bank details. And again, around support, COVID-19. So we've seen fake websites up and running. On the scam side, you'll have seen people arrested in London trying to sell fake virus detections, fake cures. It's happening in the United States as well. So people will put this label now on their emails in the hope that they're going to get to your staff. Pass on. So again, what we're looking at, the same thing, a couple of things that Joe had mentioned as well, really can boil down to the connection, the device, and the person. Whilst people think a lot of the attacks you hear that reach the news are high tech, that involved a lot of effort, at a very basic level, most of the attacks we see revolve around passwords in some shape or form. That's either a weak password that can be brute forced or guessed, a password that doesn't exist, or a password that's willingly given up as a result of a phishing email. So again, we concentrate, reinforce to employees the need to have secure passwords. If they're using their own devices, you don't know what their password rules are. And Joe's quite rightly raised that there are separate issues about bringing your own devices. You need to reinforce passwords. You need to reinforce that what are your rules around changing passwords. If all of a sudden they're getting emails claiming their system has been blocked, they need to put the password in. Need to put the password in to view their email. Two-factor authentication, software updates. Again, it's very basic level stuff, but this is what will prevent most organizations from being compromised. We had a notification through on Tuesday evening, passed to us to go out and speak to a very large organization to advise them that they had a known vulnerability on a VPN service they were using. Again, it had been patched. Sorry, the patch had been issued. Their system hadn't been patched, and had that been detected by the attackers using very simple open source tools, they could have suffered a catastrophic ransomware attack. So the outcome, terrible. The cause, not patching. A very simple system. Again, pass on, Gillian. Joe again's mentioned, Simon, external devices, USBs, physical security is a big one. We are all blinded. We're on a webinar here talking about cybersecurity. Where is the laptop? If somebody goes out for a walk, how secure is it? Are they able to port data from your system through the laptop onto USB? And if so, what happens to that USB? This could last for weeks. It could go on for significantly longer. And controlling where your information is going to be an issue for some people. Again, we'd say help your staff. When you see real world examples out there, if you see things coming out from the Northern Ireland Cyber Security Centre, through the National Cyber Security Centre, or through companies such as Vertical Structure, if it's Northern Ireland themed, if it's something that's being seen by you or your neighbour, put that out to your staff. Advise them, look, this is doing the rounds here. Some of your colleagues have seen it. Don't assume that because you've detected it, everybody will. These campaigns work because they get through on a very small percentage of people, and the aim for any organisation is to protect the whole. Again, promote genuine sources of information. This incident, COVID-19, has drawn people into the desire to know what's happening, what's going to happen, how is this impacting on my family life, on my work life. So promote genuine sources. If you want the news, we have 24/7 news available to everybody. If you want advice on healthcare, you should be going to the NHS website. You should be going to the public health website. People shouldn't be following links on an email offering them some magic cure, no matter what the wording is. But these are the vulnerabilities that will appear because they're working from home. And if that email gets through, a certain percentage of people click on it, well, then they're going to go through and potentially into your network. And the other thing is reporting. So whilst people are working from home, they're outside of the work environment. Do they still have the ability to report to somebody that this email has come through to them, or that they have clicked on that email whilst they're working from home, sitting on the sofa, sitting in the dining room? If that reporting doesn't take place, there's that delay that's built in between the potential for somebody to gain unauthorized access and your ability to actually act on it. So again, encourage the reporting. No matter how mundane some of the emails should be, there should be a system in place that allows them to share that information out. And next one, Gillian. And then just to finish off, again, we would promote and push the idea of keeping yourself up to date. The National Cyber Security Centre do weekly threat reports, which you can subscribe to, or which you can just go onto their website and see. It's been mentioned again, this is the opportunity to push out the likes of the NCSC's Stay Safe Online, their top tips for staff. People will have time on their hands. It's a free staff training package that lasts for about half an hour. It's a few videos. It's going to raise people's awareness of what's out there. It's not going to make them cyber ninjas. It's going to prevent everything happening, but it will improve the security of your organization. And then finally, when we push is the likes of the CISP, which again is another NCSC product, Cybersecurity Information Sharing Partnership. Within that, you will have various organizations posting up current threats that they're seeing. You'll also see, well, what happens when you click on that link? What's it actually trying to do? What steps can I take to prevent it? Are there indicators of compromise that I can look for from IP addresses? That again, you can get through the NCSC's website. I'm sure Simon probably has the link for it. Anybody who has an issue about it, if you want to join up, certainly you can email cyberprotect at psni.pnn.police.uk, and we'll provide that link. That'll come through to myself, and we'll certainly help sponsor anybody into that sort of group. And then just the final slide there, Gillian. Again, just a reiteration, the Cyber Essentials scheme, this is not the time that people are going to take steps to start going through the Cyber Essentials schemes. Organizations have other things to deal with. But if you look at the sort of areas that they're covering off, you can download the questionnaire. You'll see it's pretty much what we've all been talking about today, about securing your internet connection, securing your devices and software, protecting from viruses and other malware. these are the key steps that any organisation, from really a sole trader up to multinational, can take to prevent the vast majority of attacks that we're going to see out there. And that's it. Thank you very much for your time. And again, like Simon and Joe, happy to answer any questions now or if they come through later on.
Thanks very much, everybody, to Sam and also to Joe there. Just to reiterate, we do have also Sinead Lee from Ofcom on the panel here as well. So if there are any questions that we can help around from that point of view, Sinead, do you want to say hello there?
Yep. Hi everyone. Thanks very much for that. That was really useful. And yeah, Ofcom, I would just maybe want to point out that Ofcom has launched a campaign earlier this week with government and with industry on staying connected, and it mentions a lot of the points that Joe mentioned in his presentation around things that you can maybe do at home to help your broadband connection at this time, and things like using your landline and not using all devices at the one time. So I would encourage anyone who is maybe experiencing some connectivity issues to check that out on the Ofcom website. It's just on our homepage, it's easy to find. And maybe also just to point out, just in terms of what work that we're doing with industry at this time, that telecoms operators are facing difficulties. They're assuring us and ensuring government that they have got the capacity to cope, but they're obviously facing the same types of issues that all businesses are at the minute, just in terms of employee numbers, in terms of social distancing, and so they are trying their best to keep the show on the road. They are focusing at the minute mainly on maintaining the network, on repairing faults, rather than new connections at the minute. So if there's anyone out there who is waiting on a new connection, maybe to bear with the operators for now, and maybe also to say that there's a lot of strain at the minute on the mobile operators in particular as well. So we would encourage people to, as Joe said, to use a landline if possible for landline to landline calls, because that is definitely a resource that is able to cope with a lot more demand than what's on it at the minute. But yeah, that's all for me.
That's brilliant stuff. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Simon, I have another question here and I have an answer for it. It was from Trevor, I think. He was asking if the Little Book of Big Scams, which is an excellent publication, is available anywhere in hard copy. He was saying DOJ don't have any copies available, and the online copy at NI Direct is too large to print off. And I'm just reading Sam's reply to you, Trevor. Sam saying, we don't hold hard copies. There are some being held by Scamwise NI, but at this time circulating them would be an issue. But if we get a better, I'm not saying that's a bad answer, sorry Sam, but if we find out any more information, Trevor will let you know.
Gillian, what I would say is we're just about to roll out the Little Book of Cyber Scams, which is another publication by the same Metropolitan Police team.
Right.
It's designed, certainly it's designed in part for individuals, but it was primarily designed for organisations to cover off on the general sort of threats and the general sort of protection measures they can take. Again, to begin with, that will be an online publication that will get posted up because it allows us to get it out to a wider audience. And obviously there's cost implications in relation to massive printing. But it certainly will be something that we'll get out. And even if Trevor wants to get his details to me by yourself, then certainly I'll make inquiries in relation to hard copies of the other publication.
Great, thank you. Over to you, Simon.
Brilliant, thank you very much, everybody. So if there are any further questions, then please feel free to. I think you can put your hand up in a way of speaking, or type it into the chat or into the questions. we will, as I say, be making this available to everybody, so please don't be worried about that. You can come back to it a number of times. We'll be making all the links available that we were talking about as well. From my point of view, as chair of NI Cyber Cluster, I'd just like to thank especially Sam, Joe and Sinead for coming on to talk about this. It's actually one of Sam's days off, and he came on to come and talk to us. So thank you very much, Sam. Thank you very much, Joe, and thank you very much, Sinead. Also just like to thank Judith Miller from CSIT, who has been doing some fantastic work to help us on the cyber cluster, and also to Gillian for putting this whole thing together, and really appreciate everything that everybody's done. If there are any questions, please feel free to email them to Gillian and to ourselves, and we will attempt to answer them as best as we can. We are going to try to come back again for another one of these probably next week, and we'll be in touch with further details about that if anyone would be interested to hear about that. So from that point of view, unless Gillian, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, I will get the recording out to everybody, and please feel free to share it. I'll put it up online as well. We also have a new NI Cyber LinkedIn page, so please follow that as well for information.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, everybody, and we'll sign off now, but hopefully speak to you all very soon. Thank you very much.